evening.
Good evening.
Oh, y'all are good. I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to be here. It's really a pleasure to come and be able to share some things that are going on around the state. And as Pamela said, I appreciate the invitation from you. She heard me speak with WMU not long ago. But I was coming from Columbia with the team there, and so I want to bring greetings to you from Dr. Tony Wolf, our Executive Director Treasurer, and also from the staff. We just appreciate each of you, and I understand there's different churches represented here, so we appreciate you and the work that you do in your communities and your missions that are reflected around the world. And even here, you pray for your missionaries today. I know that is your heart, and that's why you're here today. So thank you. We love and appreciate you. As I come, I'm really here to serve as a state representative or a state missionary to let you know things that are going on around the state. And so we have 5 different teams at the South Carolina Baptist Convention, and I want to share with you some things that are going on with some of those teams. And so I've got some slides. You can kind of follow along with me. Our strong team is our church strengthening team, and we think anything that has to do with children's ministry, youth ministry, music ministry, those types of things, they're there to be a resource in that area. But as I share each one of these, they're all things that when I ask the team leaders, hey, can you tell me some things that are going on as a result of the giving of our churches to the Jane Chapman Missions Offering? I was there, I was getting ready for WMU meeting, and we know that WMU and our churches are just an integral part of making sure that we have those funds, the Jane Chapman Missions Offering, to do the things that are happening around the state. So all of this happens because of you. And the strong team, so I can tell you some things from Jane Chapman Missions Offering, and one was that there were going to be 60 students doing intentional internships this summer. So that's coming up, and so these students will be part of the discipleship program, growing in their faith, also growing in understanding God's calling upon their life, and just preparing them for a life of possible future ministry. And then, do y'all have children that go to Kids Salt? Anybody have that? I know you probably hear about summer salt with our teenagers, but we also have 3rd through 5th graders that go to Kids Salt. And so every year, Kathy Miles is in charge of that. She makes sure that they have a missions project. And so last year, I heard a lot about this when the students all put together bags for homeless students. So you don't think about homeless students, but there are thousands of homeless students in South Carolina in our schools. And so they put these bags together, and it really raised awareness for those children to help them understand, that there are needs right there in their neighborhoods, and it gave them a way to touch and make a difference. So that was exciting, and they'll have another project this summer as well. Now the Share team, obviously that's evangelism, and so they do so many things. But I talked with Chad Stillwell, who's their director, and he was telling me about their one-night programs, and this is just so exciting. Before I even tell you some of the statistics, I'll tell you, he says that we're just seeing a huge surge in baptisms in South Carolina, and that is so exciting. The ages 18 to 29, there has been a 42% increase in baptisms. Incredible. And ages 11 through 17, there's been a 23% increase. And he said, we really thought that COVID had messed up our students. You kept hearing, we do know that they suffered from anxiety and depression and some different things. He said, but it's also caused them to search for truth. And as they've done that, they've found Jesus. And so we're also seeing that at our one-night events, and that comes through the CP giving. So far, we have had, in 2024, 300 churches work together to host 12 different one-night events. And so those churches would host something in their community. Students would come to that. And what they're seeing, there were 7,369 students that came to that. That resulted in 673 students who accepted Christ.
Amen.
Really exciting. So just this year, we've already had 3,000 attend those events. And what it looks like is about 10% of those who will come will make professions of faith. And I'm excited to tell you, I have the stats up here for Rock Hill. This was just maybe a month ago or so. They had 1,110 students, and over 120 made decisions that night. But there's one coming close to you. So this year, their focus is on making sure that they're also in some of the smaller communities. And on May 18th, they're going to be in Batesburg, Leesville. And I wanted you to know that. So just think, May 18th, if you would just pray for those students. Their churches putting this together, they're advertising, and their students in the classrooms who are inviting their friends who were lost. And so just praying for those students to be there to hear the gospel and to respond to that. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the START teams. The START is church planting. And, you know, did you know that South Carolina is the fastest growing state in the United States? It really is. And so we have a population of 5.3 million right now, and in the next 20 years we're expected to grow another million. And so that is why there is such a focus on church planning and making sure that we have enough churches to respond to the needs that are there. So because of Janie Chapman Missions offering, again, and as of April 2025, there were 33 new South Carolina Baptist churches that are receiving monthly funding made possible by the Janie Chapman Missions offering. And of these, 6 are African American, 5 are Hispanic, 2 are Chinese, and 1 is Vietnamese. And then this was really exciting. Do I have this up here? I do not. New South Carolina Baptist churches that receive monthly funding offered that offering baptized 238 people in 2024. So these new churches are making a difference. They're reaching people that maybe might not be reached in other ways. And then I want to tell you a little bit, here's where some of these were, sorry. I want to tell you a little bit about the SERVE team, and that's the team that I serve on. And obviously, that's a team that helps churches identify the needs in the community and respond to those needs, respond to the physical needs, spiritual needs, and just create relationships. And so there's several different things that happen in our team. One of those is disaster relief. Were you guys really impacted by Hurricane Helene here? I live in North Augusta, so I saw it firsthand, and actually was able to go to Clearwater, Alabama had their site to take care of everybody. But there were actually 8 sites that were established across the state as soon as this happened, and all the way from Aiken to Spartanburg, and they were primarily recovery and then mass feeding sites. The disaster relief team completed over 1,000 jobs, provided more than 41,000 meals, made 4,000 ministry contacts, and out of all of those, 24 responded to the gospel. None of us would have wanted that hurricane to happen, but we are thankful that because of that, when people were in a struggle and in a time of really even trauma, they were able to be approached by someone who knew Jesus, loved Jesus, and was able to share the good news. And so that we were excited about that. Now, I bet you know about this. Prisoner packets. How many of y'all do prisoner packets? I thought so. So in 2024, because of your faithfulness, we were able to process and deliver 17,125 prisoner packets. And so you know what goes in those. They're hygiene items, there's papers and pens and gum, candy, all those kinds of things. Not gum, just candy. Forgive me for saying gum. I know what goes in and what doesn't. But there are other things that go in. So you pack those things, and then they come to Columbia, and there are 100 volunteers that are there that take each one of those bags and they add things to the bags. So every year they add a Christmas card and they add a devotion book. And so every time one of those prisoners receives a packet from you, they're also receiving the hope of the gospel. So we're excited about what's happening as a result of that. Now, Heart4Schools. Pamela asked me to share a little bit more. I shared it at the WMU meeting, but she asked me to share more and give you more details about what that's all about. It's really my joy to be a part of Heart4Schools and just to work with our area churches to really impact students and teachers across our state. Right now we have over 500 of our South Carolina Baptist churches who are serving 644 of our students, our schools, which is like 53% of our public schools. We're doing things like, let's see, I'm not sure what I have up here, I'll stop right there for a minute. We're just doing different things that really impact the school, whether it's for teachers, whether it's for students, whether it impacts the family. It's really our desire to see every South Carolina school connected with a church who's loving and serving them well. Here's the numbers that I was talking about, 648 partnerships. And we keep track of this because we want to make sure we know exactly which schools need a partnership. And so that's the reason for the tracking, and also just celebrating all that God has been doing. When I started this, I came to Heart4Schools 5 years ago. It was the first time it had full-time attention. And we can only track about 225 churches, or schools, churches and schools that we knew were working together. So we've had a tremendous amount of growth. And that's really happened too because of all of the things that happened because of cooperative program giving and Janie Chapman missions offering. This year we've been able to host 3 regional training events where 60 churches participated. We had 4 monthly cohorts around the state with 32 churches meeting regularly. And you all would always be welcome to be a part of those things. It's always exciting to bring churches together to have conversations about how they can go deeper and really impact the community. We learn from one another. We were also able to give 37 grants to South Carolina Baptist churches to help them begin to grow and grow a partnership. Here in Aiken County, we have 28 school partnerships. There are 42 schools, and so we need 14 more. And a few are in this area, so I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. And here are those stats, just regional training things. Now, why do we serve? This is what always surprises people. We've been invited to schools. So I'll have pastors come to me and say, you know, when I start telling another pastor about this, they always say, how do you do that? Isn't there this thing called church-state separation? And we really do have the opportunity to go into the school. We have been invited, and it's really a blessing that we've had state superintendents who understand the value of Christian people and of our churches investing. You all will probably remember Superintendent Molly Spearman. She worked with us over the last few years before she retired, and she said, you know, we can't go in speaking Jesus, but we can go in and be his hands and feet and still lead them to Jesus. And so we appreciate that. And then I've been able to be a part of the Strike Force partner group with Ellen Weaver, where she is just encouraging churches and other groups to come into the school to make a difference. So that's exciting that we have an open door. Not every state has that. There are other states that are very closed. And so we're thankful that we can go in and do these things. Maria Owens is the Director of Strategic Partnerships in Richland too, and she said, you know, when you go into a church and you begin to serve, your church becomes known as giving, loving, and supportive. Students, staff, and families see healthy, caring Christians. And what we often see is that when churches go in, we'll have teachers that maybe have not been in church for a long time, and they may say, you know what, because of your presence, because you've been coming consistently week after week, I'm going to go to church. You know, we'll have a principal who will tell one of our pastors, we've got people going to church who have not been to church in a long time. And it's because they see your love. They see the way you're loving on us. We've had pastors and leaders, WU leaders also, who've just been able to minister during hard times. You know, if I asked each one of you if you had prayer requests, if you had things you were going through, you probably all could raise your hand if you would. We all have things that we struggle with, and these teachers and these administrators are no different. And so we'll have people who will share that they've gone through a divorce. We'll have people who talk about a husband who just had a heart attack. We've had principals that are going through cancer treatment. So just a lot of different things that our churches are able to walk through. So while we can't go in just saying, hey, we are here because we love Jesus and we want you to know we love Jesus, we are able to really create relationships, and then those teachers can talk to us, and we're able to talk back with them and talk about our faith and really minister to them. Neat stories of a church that started out just giving food to students has developed over time, but there came a day when they had a teacher whose husband was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And so they asked this children's minister, hey, would you bring somebody, or would you help this teacher? Now, they were already doing teacher support, like a doctor-teacher kind of stuff. It's a little different to say, hey, would you bring your church members to go into a teacher's home? And so this children's minister prayed about it, and she really felt like this was what God was calling them to do. This was a true mission, a true ministry. And so as a result of the relationship, they did go to the person's house. They spent time sitting with him. It was during Christmas. They would sit with him to give the wife time to take a shower. They helped wrap Christmas presents. The garbage disposal broke. They fixed the garbage disposal. The pastor was able to come in and share the gospel with both the teacher and the husband. And in the end, they actually held the funeral at their church because this couple did not have a church home. So it was a sweet time of ministry, and that teacher said, you know, I have never experienced a love like this before. And that was because of it came from having a relationship and just doing some small things and growing over time, just being consistent. When a church serves, we see students have hope, they learn to read, they have someone showing up just for them, they don't have to face hunger on weekends. So we'll talk about some of those things. I also think about our communities. You know, I don't know what your community looks like right here in New Wellington. I know what mine looks like, but there are a lot of needs. You know, you think about homelessness, you think about poverty, you think about children of divorce, children who are in foster care. We have migrant families, we have refugees, all those different things. When you think about your community and think, how can I make a difference? If you just walk inside the door of the school, they are all right there, and we have opportunities. We can't do it all, but one at a time. So a lot of those, all that diversity is right there in the school. I love the scripture in Jeremiah. I've always loved Jeremiah 29. And maybe it's because I've moved a lot in my life with a husband in ministry. I've always felt like, okay, God is saying, bully where you're planted. And I think that's what your prayer card said. But he, you know, as he spoke through the prophet Jeremiah to the Israelites who've been taken into Babylon, he said, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce. Skip just a little bit there, but pursue the well-being of the city I've deported you to. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive. And I love that, because I think about each one of us. God has put us in a community, in a neighborhood, for a reason. I think He is in all of that. And so we have opportunities all around us, whether it's a neighbor, maybe it's a family member, whether it's a school, whether it's the person down the street at the general dollar, whoever that is, we are there. And I know you all can pray. So that's the first step, right? Just to pray and to know that we're going to make a difference. And that's also the first step with our school partnerships. Well, how do we serve? There are 3 specific things that we do. And so these all came. We didn't make these up. We didn't just say, oh, this sounds like a good idea. We met with the Education Oversight Committee about 6 years ago, and they said, if you really want to make a difference in your community, here are 3 specific things that you can do. The first is reading buddies, and that's going to the school 30 minutes a week to work with one student throughout the course of the year, or it could be mentoring. Backpack buddies, which is food for students on the weekend, for those that do not have food, and then teacher support. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about reading buddies, and you can see some pictures there. It's big enough for you to see. When I do a collage, it makes it kind of small. But those are, 3 of those are pictures from First Baptist Camden, where they were working with an alternative school, a middle school. They would go in and read with the student. One gentleman actually helped build one of those lending libraries. So they went in with the wood and all the different pieces and taught him how to use the tools, and they worked together side by side. But when we go in, these children, whether it's an alternative school or any school, often don't have somebody just to listen to them. They don't have somebody who repeatedly shows up for them week after week. So it means a lot to them, it means a lot to their self-esteem, and really changes the trajectory of their lives. We do know that if a child's not reading on grade level by the time they're in 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out. And if they're in poverty, they're 8 times more likely to drop out. I hate to say, but in South Carolina, that's a lot of our students. You know, we have a lot of poverty, and we also have, I have the numbers up here, 47% of our students are behind grade level, and 22% are 2 grade levels behind. I taught school, so I can imagine some of you, I think I heard maybe have taught as well. Think about a 4th grader who's reading on a 2nd grade reading level. You know, you learn to read up until 3rd grade. After 3rd grade, you read to learn. And so they're just kind of lost. They're not able to read anymore. They're not getting that instruction anymore. And so it's so important for us to help them get on track. Here's some more pictures of some reading buddies, and it looks different in every school. These people meet out in the hallway, some meet in the lunchroom. I actually go to a classroom to read with some students. It just depends on what the school asks you to do. But it is as simple as going in and spending 30 minutes a week with that one student, developing a relationship, making reading fun. You're not the teacher. You don't have to teach them anything. You just read with them. And then they find, hey, here's somebody who cares about me. Their self-esteem rises. We see their test scores rise. And we see, think about generational poverty. Think about that child that may stay in school and they stick with it when otherwise they may not have. just because of the investment of one person. Here's a picture of Cornerstone in Florence, and this is one of their volunteers who's there in the classroom. They've been serving as reading buddies for years. Now, they didn't have a large congregation by any means. In fact, they're a church that had no more than 30 people, but they had at least 10 people going to be reading buddies. And they had just invested over the years. They even got the fire department to work with them. So work with your community to get people to come in. But they have really seen a difference in reading levels, but also in the students. And so I want to tell you about one of the volunteers, and the person that leads this at the church is not the pastor. He is a lay leader, but he works night shifts, and he will work his night shift and still be right there that morning to go and see his student. And he's had several interesting things happen. Just last year, as he worked with a student, he found out that he was living in a tent by the river. So here was a homeless student that nobody knew, but because he developed a trusting relationship, that student shared that with him. He had another student, we talked about the anxiety and the depression. These are elementary students who told him he really felt like taking his life. And so he was able to share that with somebody in the school. Again, that relationship which is very important. In River Bluff in Charleston, we have a children's minister who was working with a kindergartner. And so it doesn't have to be that you're reading a book. She was just trying to help him learn his letters. They were playing with Play-Doh. This little guy lost his mom over the summer and had not talked about it with anybody, had not grieved, and began to talk about mom being at a picnic. And so she thought, well, I wonder if Dad's dating somebody, because she knew the story, and just listened. But over time, she really found out what was going on, and he opened up and shared that his mom had died, the first person he had shared that with. And so she was that safe person. So it's more than reading. It's being there for them to have that relationship and somebody that they trust. And we know that that's making an eternal difference. And then backpack buddies, that's food for our students on the weekend. 25% of our students live in poverty, and 1 in 6 go to school hungry. You know that they may have breakfast, they may have lunch there, they may not have a whole lot at home. That night, they may have chips and just not a lot of healthy things. And we know that hunger is a huge obstacle to learning and to brain development. And we have a story of somebody, I'll check my watch before I tell too many stories. We have a story of someone that was in Kershaw County, high school student, and just seemed to be a little bit off. Teacher sent him to the school nurse, and this nurse just began asking questions, trying to figure out what was going on. Well, this was Monday. He had not eaten since Friday. And so this was Easter weekend, y'all. When you hear that, your heart just breaks. It breaks for any time, that Easter weekend. You know how we live life with family and just sharing. These families don't have other people to rely on to help them. And that association decided they were going to make sure that none of their schools were hungry. So they partnered together, and they're providing backpacks in each one of their schools now. How do we do that? Here's a picture from First Baptist North Augusta where they're putting food bags together. It's great to involve others too, have the children do that. Sometimes I have a children's group that will pack these bags. A lot of different churches do it different ways. But I want to tell you about this church just a little bit. You all may know First Baptist because it's in your association. They just started with those backpacks years ago. They prayed about where to go. They are not in a school right next to them because they felt like, those schools have PTOs or PTAs, they have support. We know this Clearwater down the road is not. And they knew there was a lot of poverty, a lot of needs. So they prayed about it individually. They had a list of schools, and they all came back and said, let's do Clearwater. And they have just been so dedicated there, and they've grown in what they've done over time. But they started with that one thing with those backpacks for a few kids, 10 backpacks a week. And last spring, this was so exciting, they were invited to a program. It was a yearbook dedication, and the school dedicated their yearbook to First Baptist North Augusta. And they said they did it because they put in there because they knew North Augusta had come to share Christ's love with them. And they talked about just how important that was and showed some pictures. But we really can have a huge impact, and people do know why we're there, even when we're not able to share some of those things. And then the last bucket that I mentioned is the teacher support. And you all, if I asked you, was there a teacher that impacted you, you probably all could raise your hand. Or if I could say, who was your first grade teacher? Do you remember? I remember my first and second and third grade teacher, and it was a long time ago. But I think teachers impact us in incredible ways. And sometimes they are the safe place. And I'll tell you, I taught first grade for a couple of years, and I would be teaching, and I would get called mama because you're the person that's there with them 7 or 8 hours. And so I know that these teachers have a great impact, but I know it's also hard. We know before the pandemic that teachers and nurses tied as the most stressful profession in the United States. And we also know that every year 7,000 of our teachers will leave the profession. Now that doesn't mean that they're all just quitting. It means some are retiring. It means some are maybe moving to a different school, a different state, whatever that looks like. But that does leave us in a lurch sometimes. 1,613 unfilled jobs just last year at the beginning of the school year. So that means our schools are starting in a hole. So what we want to do, what we're trying to do in each one of the schools where we have partnerships, we want to encourage those teachers. We go in and we encourage the first year teachers. And another reason for that is because between 40 and 50% of our early career educators are going to leave in the first 5 years. They're not going to stick with it. Well, we've got all these retiring, and then we've got these young ones coming who are not sticking with it. Well, what's going to happen with our education system? So we have to do all that we can to encourage our teachers. And it really is simple. We can pray for those teachers. That makes such a difference. And some of you, I don't know if y'all have had a prayer walk, sometimes just having a scheduled time when you go and you pray and you gather around the flagpole. And this is before school starts. There's different ways that we can do that. Some, once you build that relationship, we'll actually go into the school and get to pray in the classrooms, over the classrooms. Some even while the teachers are doing the first week. So building those relationships is important. Notes of encouragement. If you've gotten a really sweet note from somebody, do you hold on to it? These teachers do the same thing. They'll stay on their bulletin boards for months to encourage them. So sometimes those notes of encouragement are the best things that you can do. And then volunteering in the classroom. Treats on special occasions. It doesn't have to be expensive. When we talked about First Baptist, people think, oh, well, that's a big church. But the person that leads that will always say, we're not in the church budget. And we don't want to be, because it lets us see how God will answer our prayers and how God will work through his people. And so they'll put the need out there, and they do a good job of working with groups in their church that will just help in different ways. But these treats on special occasions, thinking of the teacher mailboxes, just once a month, a little candy bar with a note or something special. Some people do meals on staff work days, provide school supplies. I want to tell you about Berea Baptist, and I mentioned this at the WU meeting. They're just down the road from y'all over in Edgefield. They came to a Camp Levita meeting several years ago and heard about Heart4Schools, and they're just a little WU group. There are 8 ladies, and they said, you know what, we can do this. And so their high school's just down the road, Strong Thurman, and they thought, we need to do this. And so they had begun serving their school, that they really started quickly. And even had me come and spend some time at one of their WU meetings. And I just wanted to say I am happy to do that with any of you, just to talk about, hey, what can this look like? How can we make this happen? And they take snacks once a month to the break room. And as a result of that, they've created relationships. They put cards with that too, to say, hey, this is from Berea Baptist. But now the school comes to them to ask them for some different things. And they're already thinking, remember, this is 8 people, small congregation, but the congregation helps. They're already thinking, you know what, Jet Middle School also needs help. How can we help them? So that's where their heart is. But it's because, when you're serving and you're part of that and you see the impact that you're making, it's so rewarding. And so, we think about the joy that comes to those we're serving, but there's so much joy in serving as well. And these ladies have figured that out. Where do we start? We begin with prayer. And so if any of you are interested about a school partnership, this is what I tell our churches when I'm doing a training. You pray about, God, do you want me to do this? How do you want me to do this? What school would you want me to be a part of? And I always say, there may be one person in the crowd that says, oh, we've got to do this. But they've got to have at least maybe 3 or 4 people to help them. You can't do it by yourself. And so pray about that team. And then you just make an appointment at the school and you meet with the principal and just say, hey, how can we help? We don't go into it with our agenda. We don't want to walk in and say, hey, Heart4Schools does this, this, and this. We want to go in and say, hey, we value what you're doing. We know you are shaping the lives of our young people, and we care about our young people too. How can we help you? How can we walk beside you? Now, this is where the coaching comes in, and I can kind of walk you through all the different scenarios, but sometimes they may just say, well, hey, would you, in this picture, this was kind of Myrtle Beach area, we have a, what would you call that thing outside? A covered area. So we have this covered area that really needs painting so we can use it for a classroom and do some outside things. And so that's what that church did. They did what they wanted, and then they went back again and said, well, what else can we do? Sometimes it's all about building that trust. But I can also say that if you went to a school and said, hey, how can we help? And is there something we can do for your teachers? There's always a yes and simple ways to do that. Now, what about your church? I wanted to be personal. And so for you, you might just start, just like you did tonight, praying for those missionaries. Begin to pray for your schools. See what God says to you about the schools that are in your area. Look up the website. Pray for the administrators. Pray for teachers. You may know some of the teachers. You may know some of the students. You may have grandchildren and children in those schools. So pray for them by name. And then pray for safety over those schools is another thing. And then, boy, I wish I had this pulled up so I could see it better, where my notes are. There are 2 schools around you. I'm going to turn around. There's Sudfield Middle School. And let's see, there's a New Elton Middle STEM School and Greendale Elementary. So Greendale Elementary does not have a partner, and neither does the STEM school. I will say Millbrook does some things with Schofield, but I will also say if you feel like that you want to do something there, it takes a village. And so, Millbrook can't do everything in one place, and they kind of get spread out with different schools. And so I would say if you're interested in serving one of these schools, then just pray about it. See where God would lead you to be. And maybe your whole group doesn't want to do something, or you don't have traction yet, but maybe you just go, you talk to the guidance counselor. This is what I did because I'm new in North Augusta. And I'm in a church that serves, so we serve Belvedere Elementary, but I also knew there were needs closer to where I live at Mossy Creek, and my church has done things with both, but I understood there were some mentoring needs. And so I just called the guidance counselor and said, hey, do you have some needs? How can I help? And they were able to plug me in. So as one person, I just go once a week. It's not my whole church doing anything there right now. But as one person, I'm doing something, and one person can make a difference. So whether you're volunteering in the classroom, sitting with a student, whatever that looks like, there are possible ways. There we go. I've worked so hard, and look, there it is. New Elton Middle STEM School and Greendale Elementary. Those are the 2 that I don't know of in partnerships. And so making a difference, you can pray about your own involvement. And think about the gifts God's given you. You may think, oh, I'm not a teacher, but has God given you the ability to listen? He has given you a heart for students, and has given you time. Time you're trying to, I would say you're trying to figure out what to do with it. I know everybody's busy. You retire and you say, oh, I've got more to do than I ever did. But how does God want you to use that time? And consider volunteering as a reading buddy or mentor, encouraging teachers. Now, I left about 5 minutes for you to ask questions and make comments. So I don't want you to be shy. What do y'all think? Any comments, any questions?
It was a great, very thought out discussion, and it really helped me understand more about what our needs are here. But we have worked with both those schools before. We just haven't gone in and partnered with them.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely do need our help.
That's awesome.
Especially Greendale. Yes.
And they're both Title I schools, so
Yes.
I would guess so. I did look that up. And people ask me too, what do I have to do to be part of Heart4Schools? If you're serving, you are doing the work of Heart4Schools. There's no membership. There's no, hey, you have to come to a training. We're at the convention. We're there just to be a support to you. And so, we provide resources in terms of trainings. We provide opportunities for you to come together to get ideas from other people, to just that encouragement. And then we have those grants that I mentioned earlier that are made possible by your giving to the Jamie Chapman Missions Offering. So say you want to start a partnership and you're afraid of that conversation with the principal, maybe they might ask too much. Well, we do have those grants that can help you get started with that. And two, I would say, don't be afraid if you do go to a school and ask, hey, what can you do? And it's more than you can do. You just say, you know what, that's a little bit much for us to do right now. We might get there one day, but is there something smaller? We always say, under promise and over deliver. So that way we can be faithful. Any other thoughts or questions?
Very interesting. This June the 1st, this year, I will be completing 40 years of retirement as a Georgia school teacher.
Wow, that's incredible. What did you teach?
I taught in the Savannah area and in the Effingham County area.
High school, middle school?
I started with my precious 6th grade. I love 6th grade. I taught 6th grade for 8 years.
Oh, bless you.
And I loved it every minute. But I've been busy ever since because I'm also in my 72nd year as a minister.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, you know the needs firsthand. Any of you had children in teaching anywhere? Grandchildren teaching?
I have a daughter that's also at Southern and she has a lot of needs that her students.
And you know
Our
that's
pastor,
ah,
He's a teacher.
I don't know. So you know firsthand. And kind of,
I served as a pastor at the same time that I was doing teaching. So I served 4 or 5 churches over the years. So, not doing that now. I'm a church musician.
you stayed busy. Well, if you were a teacher and pastoring at the same time, you don't have much free time. That's a lot. Well, and I want to say too, the guidance counselor thing, you know, when we talked about those backpack buddies, you can also just partner up with the guidance counselor. It doesn't have to be anything big and elaborate or ongoing. You can just say, hey, our church is here, and if you have a need with a guidance counselor, what is it? Is there a family we can help with? Is there something we can help with? Sometimes a child just needs a pair of shoes, you know, and they don't have a way to do that. And then a school nurse, you know, we've had school nurses tell us that they've had to pay for just about everything that they use, you know, throughout the year because they don't really have much of a budget. And, you know, you think about all that they need, whether it's hygiene things, lice kits, Band-Aids, just all those types of things.
and that's our pastor's wife.
Well, there you go. So there are some needs. They can tell you what those needs are, but just starting with something as simple as that, of saying, hey, how can we help with this, makes a huge difference. You were going to say something.
Could you expound a little bit on information about the grants available, what types
Sure.
of things, or how you would go about that? I don't have anything in mind, I'm just...
Right, how does that work? Well, again, it all comes from the Jane Chandler Missions offering that, you know, that money comes in and it's kind of divided among the teams. And so from my standpoint, I have a certain amount from Heart4Schools that's allocated and, you know, it's used for grants. And so there's an online form. So really you would just, let's see if I can find stuff out there. Here's my information. You would just call me or email me and say, hey, I would really like to have more information about those grants. And there's a form that you fill out. And it's so simple. You know, it's a couple of questions. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to accomplish. And this is how much we need. And we don't try to make it hard. There are no receipts for it or anything. We just ask that you send us a story, you know, after it's over of, hey, this is what we did and this is what we accomplished. But typically those grants range anywhere from $500 to $1,000. And so that really can get you started. And the thought is with that, you know, we know that churches start something, it's not planned in the budget. And, you know, when you have that initial conversation, you want to be able to say yes. And so that's what that's for. And we do say, we like for churches to, you can apply 2 years in a row, but we'd like you to give other churches a chance after that 2 years. Doesn't mean you can't ever apply again, especially if there's a need that comes up. But because there's so many churches and new churches trying that, you know, we just have limited funds, so we say 2 years in a row. Did I answer enough with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will tell you from experience, we worked the Women on Mission for Foreman worked at Greenville 2 different times in the 90s. I was much younger then. And we went and asked to prayer walk, and we were told you cannot come on the grounds and pray. You will have to walk the street. And actually, we had names of students, all the teachers, and as we read those names, and people were watching us. And I think we were more of a witness to the community than we were to the school. And the other time, at that time, we could bring the children to our fellowship hall. And we chose, I'm thinking we had at least 10 students, and one individual worked with their student for a whole year. And we still hear from those people what a difference it made in that child who was just lagging behind.
I love that. What an incredible testimony. That's awesome. And boy, we have them lagging behind now, and it does make a difference when one person will invest. And hopefully, I don't know about the school now. Things change with every administration, and so some are more open than others. But typically, you always want to ask permission, but typically you can be on the school grounds, from what I hear, and pray. But and like I said too, sometimes they say, "Oh yeah, come on," and come on in the building. It depends, or just they'll have certain times that they say that's okay. It's never when the students are there. But I will say this: First Baptist North Augusta has such a relationship with Clearwater that they go to the flagpole once a week, and their group of volunteers, they pray around that flagpole maybe every Tuesday morning, I think. And the teachers just know to kind of look for them, and they appreciate that. But not every school can do that. Not every church. Anything else?
Angela, just a question. Oklahoma, the governor signed into law that the Bible be part of the school curriculum. Do you know if there's been any petition to our governor for such to take place?
I have not heard that. I do know that there are opportunities for our children to hear the gospel. So we have a lot of churches that are part of, they'll have a good news club, and so they'll do that after school, and we hear a lot of churches that they'll have salvations from that. In fact, Millbrook just started that, and have a lot of salvations from their good news club. I can't tell you what school, but I hear that across the board, and then FCA, with our middle schools and high schools. There are a couple of other different groups. There are some FCAs that are doing some things in elementary schools now. That's kind of a new thing. And those are maybe before school, some of the people that I'm talking with. So the door is open, I think you have to create the relationship, but the door is open to be in the school building as long as it's before or after school. There's nothing that can stop you from doing that. And then there are some release time Bible as well, where the church will go and pick up the students from the school, bring them to their church, and the pastor will teach that lesson. It's for credit, and then they take it back. It's a fast turnaround, within an hour or so. But that's all I know of. I will say this: when my son was in high school, this has been quite a while. He's 30 now. We were in Georgia, and he had a class that was a Bible class. I don't know how they did that. It was, it was an elective, but they did.
Talitha Baptist has the Good News Club at Greenville.
Oh, that's good.
I was part of that, and we did have a fifth grader pray to receive Christ.
That's awesome.
So it was very exciting. In fact, we're doing checker week next week.
Wonderful. And you'll get children to come to that maybe have not ever been to church. Anything else before I wrap up? I just appreciate your attentiveness. I know I get excited, and I know it's getting close to 7 o'clock, and you've had a long day, but you've been wonderful listeners, and I appreciate your questions and your comments. But just know that if you are interested in any kind of further support, whether I come to a WU group and talk more about something, or I come and we have different churches here. If you're interested in learning more. Did I put something up here? I may not have. This tells you our website. So Heart4Schools.org with the number 4. If you go to that, or you use the QR code, that'll take you to our Facebook page. There's a lot of resources on there. We'll answer a lot of questions. There's also a place that says events on there, and this is what I should have put up there. We're having a huge training in October, so October 16th. Where we've invited a keynote speaker to come and talk. She's from Dr. Tammy Pulaski from Francis Marion. She's going to talk about what poverty does to our students, just the different wiring of the brain neurologically, and how we also can make a difference as volunteers. And then we have a lot of good breakout sessions. But I'm excited about that that is on the Facebook page, so we'd love to have you come to that as well. But, how about I pray for us as we wrap up our time? And then I'll let Pam know. Lord, we are just so thankful for who you are, for your love for us. We're thankful that you've placed us in our communities, and God, we're thankful for the gifts that you've given us, whether they're abilities, whether it's just the ability to have a heart for others, whether it's compassion, whether it's physical resources, whether it's our time. God, I pray that you would speak to each one of us and show us how you'd like for us to use those for you and for your glory. God, I thank you for Corinth Baptist and for the other churches that are represented here. Lord, I know that every person in this room has a heart for you and for the gospel and for just making you known. And so, God, I pray that you would just continue to bless their ministries. I do pray for these two schools right here in this community, actually three schools, and pray for their administrators to make wise decisions and just to have energy and strength and stamina and wisdom in these last few days of school, just a few weeks left. Lord, I know for me in the classroom, these last few weeks can just be a little hectic. And I know students get so excited. My words were, it's like herding cats, and I know teachers feel that, so I pray for energy for them. I pray for a settledness for our students. Lord, I pray for these students who will be home over the summer, maybe with no one to look after them, and pray your hand of protection over them. Pray for our teachers and these pastors who are teaching and leading and shepherding here as well, God, that you would just give them the stamina and the energy and the strength they need each day and the encouragement, and just remind them of all of the wonderful impact they're making. And God, I pray that we would be an encouragement to one another. And again, I thank you for this group and for their listening ears tonight. And just for our South Carolina Baptist churches, for all that they do.